Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining in this evening's BVNA live Q&A event surrounding the CMA review. My name is Nikki, I'm a registered veterinary nurse and council member, and I'll be chairing the webinar this evening. Just going to take a few moments to let everybody join so we can let everybody join into the webinar before I introduce our speakers. Great, so we'll start now. Before I introduce our speakers for this evening, I have just a couple of quick housekeeping points to run through first. You should see a toolbar which will appear at the top or the bottom of your screen. Please take a moment to familiarise yourself with this toolbar where you'll find audio settings, live chat Q&A, and also the caption functions if you'd benefit from having subtitles available. If you do have any questions, please preferably use the Q&A box. We will be monitoring the chat box, but for ease, if you could use the Q&A box, that would be preferable. And if you wish to ask a question anonymously, there is the option to do this via the Q&A box. And so on to tonight's session. As you will all be aware, the CMA reported on its findings from its initial review of the veterinary sector yesterday. And we know this has caused some concern amongst colleagues and potential backlash from clients. As this is something which is likely to affect all of us working in practice in some way or another, we wanted to provide a supportive and safe space to come together and ask questions. There may be some questions that we don't have information to answer immediately due to the unfolding investigation, but if this is the case, we will ensure that we'll follow up with further information and guidance when we can. So I'd like to introduce you to Lindsay Hughes, our BVNA President, and Joe Oakton, past President and also Chair of BVNA's Advisory Board. If you'd both like to introduce yourselves and say a few words about your understanding of the CMA review so far. Lindsay, if you'd like to go first.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Hughes. Hopefully you know who I am. So I have been in some of the discussions in the run-up to the CMA publication yesterday, and I think through conversations I've had with members as well, I'm trying to look at the positives that the CMA review will bring and the opportunities that will bring. Unfortunately, obviously, I think some of the press exposure on Monday was a little one-sided, so it's quite unbalanced, which is why we felt it was really important to have this discussion with you this evening. And just to set the scene a little bit, there were 56,000 people that responded to the survey. 45,000 of those were pet owners. And so to give you a bit of context, according to 2023 survey, there were 28.4 million households in the UK in 2023. 57% of those were pet owners. So you're looking at around 15 million pet owners, households that own pets in the country, and 45,000 people have responded. So when you look at it like that, it's potentially not as many people. So just to give it a little bit of context, and I think then, unfortunately, like we've talked about, some of the media reporting has been inflammatory over points that they perhaps maybe don't really understand at the moment.
Thank you, Lindsay. Joe.
Thanks, Nikki. It's really nice to be here. Thank you for the invite to come and join this. I was obviously BVNA president a little while ago, and now I'm on the advisory board. So my direct links with this investigation have been from an external point of view. I work for one of the corporate groups, which is really involved with supporting our teams within this in the wider aspect as well. And my understanding of the review and seeing what's come out of it at the moment really is just pressing for us to be more transparent with everything that we do, which is something that actually we really want to do anyway. We need to be doing this. We need to get more confident at having those conversations. We need to be more transparent with what we do, because actually we're looking at informed consent with that as well. And we also need to be aware that there are regulations that we have to follow that are completely out of our control with what we can do. And it's going to force, as Lindsay said, that wider look into how everything is done. And I agree that the media, as always, with everything is so negative. And Lindsay has said that the number of respondents that we've had, a lot of them are going to have had emotional experiences which have led them to respond. Those that are generally satisfied, happy, are the ones that don't usually get involved in these discussions. And I think it's really important to remember that as we go through today.
And I think,
Absolutely.
sorry, just to add to that, Jo, it's a really, really good point about the fact that we as a society don't tend to give feedback on positive experiences we've had. We tend to only do it if we're disgruntled. But actually, it's what we can learn from those people who are disgruntled. You know, what could we have done better in that situation? What could we have been clearer about? So it's not necessarily that somebody has done something wrong, but actually it's learning what we could do differently to make it easier for someone to understand something that we think they should understand.
Yeah, agreed.
Excellent. Thank you, ladies. So we already asked for questions to be emailed in to BVNA, and we have been very lucky to receive some, but obviously during this webinar, please put your questions into the Q&A box. So ladies, I'll just start going through the list that we've already been given. So first of all, how do we deal with the abuse that caregivers are giving to the veterinary profession, whether it's in person or it's online? The vet bashing is unreal. It doesn't help with what is already a profession on its knees. Who'd like to go first?
I mean, I would agree with that. And I think it's very easy to say, take a step back, because I think I didn't explain previously, but my role is that my day role is that I'm a director of veterinary practice. So I know that although I'm there, I'm slightly removed from that front line, but it's actually understanding that that client is coming at you, that they don't understand, they're frustrated, they haven't got all the information, all the facts, they've been given half the story, not even half the story from the media and the CMA, because the CMA's report is also very vague at the moment. It's not particularly detailed. It's an overview of these issues, which leads to people being able to make their own judgments or assumptions about something without that clarity. And it's lumping in, you know, like corporates as a whole, when they all act differently, independents, you know, that there are good and bad out there of everything. So I think it's trying hard, and I know it is hard, to recognize that it isn't personal towards you, because it isn't. It's a situation that they don't understand. I think being mindful about what you put out on your own social media, because I know that some practices have reacted to sort of almost set out clearly to their clients what they do and what makes them differently and how they comply with the things that have been raised. But in doing that, you have to remember that those people that are affected are your colleagues on the floor, and sometimes those people aren't the decision makers in practice. So it can have a negative effect on other practices around you, especially if we're looking at the corporate independent conversation topic that's come up in this as well.
Absolutely. The only thing I'd add to that, Lindsay, that was a really good explanation of kind of how to deal with that situation. But also it's thinking about picking your battles. There are battles on social media within specific forums that are going on that you are not going to change those individual people's minds, regardless of what you say. We saw it with the XL bully legislation that came in. We've seen it with other various things, with medications that we utilize, with vaccinations, with flea treatments. We see it constantly, and there are people that we're not going to be able to change their minds. So pick your battles. Those clients that are calling into you that are clients of yours, again, that is that worry, that is that anxiety. And sometimes it's really helpful to just take on the perspective of the client and see perhaps what they see. And how would you deal with any complaint where anybody was worried about a situation? It's where you need to communicate. You need to have that open discussion. Try and get an understanding yourself of the processes within your individual practice and group as to how we do things. Do we provide estimates? Are clients aware that they can ask for these? Are we proactive? So be comfortable with what you do in your practice. Be aware of all your procedures and protocols. And like Lindsay said right at the beginning, try and see this as a learning experience rather than taking it as a personal attack, because it's not an attack on you. They don't know you. And picking your battles is really, really important because there's only so much you can take. Some people are a little bit more resilient, we say thicker skin towards these bits, and can handle it. But if it's really impacting you mentally and draining you, then that is where you do need to set your own boundaries and step away. Think about your stress bucket and that overflowing. Are you switching off from work? Are you turning off social media if you can't step away from it? Are you doing things to protect you and your time when you are not in work? We can't avoid it in work. We're going to get those calls. But if you're really feeling it, then you need to make sure that you've got the ability to step away, talk to people in a safe space about your experience, and then do things that you need to do to support you to help build your mental resilience in that as well.
And I think just the only slight thing to add to that is that actually it can be really hard. And I know that we're sat here giving you this advice now, but if you are exhausted, you're short-staffed, all these things that we know impact veterinary practices day to day, and you're on your knees, you've worked however many shifts in a row, and you're hanging on by an emotional thread. That person says one thing to you and it's just enough to set you back. Or, we know how hard that we all work and we know how difficult it can be, but to be kind to yourself, like Jo said, and just take that step away, because it's the only thing that you can do. And it's not that you don't care, it's really difficult because especially in the nursing profession, we are carers, it's instinctive within us, it's what we do. And so we feel that, we really feel that, but there has to be those boundaries that you put in place. You have to be able to just step aside. And a lot of these things, unfortunately, that are being faced with at the moment can't be changed by those people in practice. We can do things better, we can learn from stuff, but a lot of the stuff is going to have to be dealt with at a higher level.
Absolutely. And the next question actually follows on really nicely from what you've just discussed, which is the corporatization of the profession is obviously a major topic. It's difficult for those that are employed by an independent, who were employed by an independent, that has then been bought over by corporate. How do those people keep positive in these difficult times, especially when, as you stated earlier, local independent practices are being subtly unsupportive on their social media platforms?
And not so subtly as well. I mean, there are some comments that we've seen out there, and I think this goes back to what Lindsay said right at the beginning, that we really need to be aware and mindful of our comments and the impacts that they're having, because while they feel they may be highlighting independence as a great and a good, what impact is that having on veterinary teams within other corporate practices in their areas, in other areas? And corporates have been bundled into one. They're all really different. Just as independent practices are all really different, they have different models that they run on, they have different values, different principles. The practices work differently within them. Some retain quite a lot of independent behaviours as well. And we need to be aware of this and stop bundling sort of corporates as bad, independence is good, and treat everybody as a veterinary practice providing a service to the public, to uphold animal welfare, which is what we are attempting to do. It is difficult when you see that, but again, when I go back to picking your battles, making sure that we are controlling our own behaviours and actions. We can't control the actions or behaviours of other people, but we can control how we respond and behave in those situations. And it's making sure that we're not doing that back. We're not resorting to this argument. We are all in this profession together to achieve the same goal, and we need to support one another within that.
I think it's also being mindful that there are many great positives to working in different types of practice. Corporates have got their benefits, which I'm sure a lot of you will benefit from, and as do independents. And so this isn't really, I know there's elements here that are being focused on, but actually overall, this is going to shed a light on things that have been key areas of concern for not only nurses, but other members of the team for some time. And I think this is just a small part of it, and actually, like I say, you can't lump it all in as one, which is what we were talking about earlier. That's where unfortunately we don't have the finer details yet, and not one corporate will operate the same as another corporate. Every company will be different, much like the independent here and the independent 10 miles down the road are completely different as well. It doesn't mean that one is better than the other, and I think we need to wait for those details to come out on that.
Absolutely. Great questions come through live. One of the key areas that was flagged by the CMA review was how the regulatory framework is out of date. They specifically highlighted the RCVS practice standards scheme and how only 69% of practices have signed up for this voluntary scheme. So how important do you think it is for all practices to follow the scheme, and what can we as RVNs do to champion this?
I think we're pretty aligned in this, aren't we, Jo?
Yeah.
I'll let you go first.
We really should do it. Now, obviously, the practice standards, it's not perfect. Nothing ever is in that way, but it is guidance that standardizes practices and behaviours across different practices. VNs can significantly lead the entire thing and own that, because it's all information gathering that needs to be done and putting processes and protocols into place. It's a huge area that VNs can take ownership of within a practice. And it allows us a flag to say to our clients, we are following these guidelines, principles. There are different levels of it that we can work towards, but at the moment it is voluntary. But I'm sure Lindsay will say as well, it may not be for much longer. It is incorporated within the discussions that are being had around the Veterinary Surgeons Act at the moment.
Yeah, and that's to regulate businesses rather than individuals. And it is so important because, like we've talked about before, there are a lot of people in practice who will be here today that maybe aren't part of the decision making within your practice, but you could be held accountable. And so it's so important. And especially when we look at, like Jo was saying, 70% of, I think it's like 69-70% of practices are actually signed up. It is voluntary, but of those 5,000 average, roughly, 5,000 practices in the UK, that means there's 1,500 practices that are not being checked in any way whatsoever, other than obviously with the VMD medicines. So it's so important, and that's what I feel is more of a focus, because more than likely, and I don't want to say this verbatim, but I know that a lot of corporates will sign up to the practice standard scheme, and they have very strong areas that they, someone's responsible for health and safety. They have various different departments that are responsible for different things. And not only does it mean that we're all doing that properly in all practices, but it actually protects the staff as well. So if you're unhappy about something, or you feel like something isn't being done properly, that's brilliant. But more so, it's about animal welfare and protecting the public, which is obviously RCVS's role, within this, and that's really, really important. And that's where also, we can help educate the clients more on what we should and what we are doing as veterinary practices. It goes back to that transparency again, doesn't it? Being transparent about everything that we do, and raising that awareness. And certainly, yeah, I think it's something that's really important, that it is something that should be done. And I don't know, I struggle to understand why you wouldn't do it. And potentially maybe it's a time element, like Jo was saying, traditionally vets have been the leaders in practice, and maybe they haven't the time to do it. Well, allow your nurses to do it. It doesn't even just have to be nurses. It can be your client care team, your practice manager. It can be a team thing. It can be that actually this is what we're going to do as a practice, who wants to get involved and help in these different areas. So really bring everyone together. I just think, yeah, it's something that needs to happen.
It'll help on everybody within the team also understand the running of the practice and what's involved within that as well, which is only going to be a benefit.
Yeah,
absolutely. So one of the topics was obviously prices on websites, etc. One of the questions we got through: are we allowed to put prices on our website and our social media? As I was under the impression this was thought of as collusion or price fixing.
Okay, so we're not allowed to fix prices. We're not. So even within your corporate groups, the individual practices set their prices. We're not allowed to all have a meeting, join up and say we need to charge this for this. That would not be allowed. However, we are meant to be transparent with prices. And I know that there are certain practices that have price lists up of their top services that have got fixed prices with them for clients to see. We're meant to display the prices of the top medicines that we have in practice as well. Advertising wise, we've got to be careful, because we can't advertise prescription only medicines and their prices and give them as a list, because we're not allowed to do that. But with regards to our prices, we really should be sharing those. And actually, the RCVS Code of Conduct says that, especially with our new clients, we need to give really thorough information to them about our fees and our pricing structures. How many of us are doing that? So actually, you know, it's a really good opportunity to review your processes. Are we being clear and transparent with our prices? Because it's something that is in our code of conduct we're being told to do.
And I think with that there's a struggle there, isn't there? Because we can put up our routine procedures, but how do we charge or how do we price for something when we don't know what's wrong with it and we don't know what tests we're going to have to do? It is really difficult, and that's potentially why we shy away from doing it. And actually, it's a time element. So we were talking earlier actually about how much training do our teams have on having financial discussions with people, because it tends to be something that as vets and nurses we shy away from. Why do we shy away from it? Is it because we feel that we're overpriced? Do we understand the fee structure? Do we understand the value in what we're doing? And again, it comes back to being transparent. So the transparency that we will give to clients with this review will also come back to the practice team as well. And it's using or being aware of any financial information that's shared with you. So are the figures shared with you? Do you understand them? Do you feel that you can go and ask? Do you go and ask? So it's having some accountability ourselves for the information that is there and making sure that we understand it. Or if it isn't there, can we access that information? And for those of us that are leaders in the practice, are we sharing this information? Is it clear? Do we share it in a way that's easy for people to understand? Do we allow them to come and ask those questions? And the other thing about sharing estimates we talked about earlier, you know, if you have a consult that's say 10 minutes long, is that enough time to have a conversation with a client, review the patient in front of you and give them an estimate of costs or various different treatment options? It really isn't. So actually, again, you know, I know it's dependent on what you're presented with. If it's an emergency, it is slightly different, and we are going to have to adapt a little bit there. But if it's something that's come in, needs to come back in for a lump removal or even orthopedic surgery, whatever it might be, can we put a process in place in our practice that means that that information is delivered to the client in a different way? Can, after that consultation, can they be sent an estimate via email? Can I have a conversation with somebody? Doesn't need to be the vet that's doing that, but we do need to educate our nurses and our client care team members to understand, to be able to have those questions, which is why I think traditionally we leave it for vets to do, because they understand why it's being priced, what it is that they need. So we need to have that whole team approach to doing this, because ultimately the fees that are coming in are paying for the things that we don't necessarily understand how much they cost, which is why clients don't understand why we charge what we charge. So it's all one big circle, and it's all about transparency.
Absolutely. One of the things that I always teach our reception teams to do is on that phone call, every person who books an appointment gets told the consultation price, because it sets that expectation that there is a fee charged, this is what the fee is charged, and then you can encourage them to ask for further information as well. So there is some proactivity from our clients, because there is definitely a hesitation on both sides to discuss price, whether that be because of embarrassment, of not wanting to ask, of feeling like if asking makes it look like I don't care about my pet, which definitely occurs.
Yeah.
So we need to have that proactive conversation with them in a confident way that shows that, you know, this is this, and then people can make an informed decision about what we want to do. And there's a lot of responsibility on us to do that.
And I think with that as well, people are probably sat there thinking now, oh, we talk to them about money and they say that's all we're interested in. And it is unfortunately an ongoing battle that we're going to have to face. But if we provided the client with all of the information, we've given them informed choices of treatment options, then there isn't really anywhere else that they can go with that. And, you know, again, it's making them understand the value of what it is and the difficulty. And I know we've talked about it before as BVNA, and I know recently BVA have raised it as well, but there isn't an NHS for animals. And that is one of the biggest issues. I think clients just cannot understand the value, the cost of some of the procedures that we undertake. And that's always going to be difficult for us. But the more we talk about it, like Jo said, the more financial conversations we have, the easier it is. And it's making it commonplace. You know, your hospitalized patients, some of you may already do this, stick a tick box on the form to say client updated on costs. On a lot of places it might be there. Do you actually do it? Because they have no understanding of that, and it will really, really help the difficult conversation at the end of the day when that hospitalized patient goes home. We just need to make it the norm.
Definitely. Another question, do insurance companies have a financial stake in the sector? as do they have approved referral lists? Is money changing hands for this?
This would be down to a deeper investigation that is out of
Yeah.
our hands. The insurance companies are completely independent in what they do. And actually, the insurance company holds the contract with the client, not with us. Now, we actually have to, and this comes through in practice standards scheme, we have to make sure that the referral option that we are offering to our client is the right referral practice for that patient at that time. So we can't use specifically, we can't send everybody to a referral hospital that's within our own group, for example. That would be wrong. We're not meant to do that. So we need to refer to the right place. If an insurance company is dictating specific referral places to send that client, that's up to the client to deal with, and it's the contract that they have with them, not with us. We can refer to the place that's most appropriate. With regards to money changing hands, that's a different investigation that is not anything to do with us that we have any control over.
Okay, another question we've had is, I work for an independent practice and independents have an overall market share of 40%. Could we create an association of independent practices or something similar in order to access the buying power of the larger corporates?
They actually already exist. So there are buying groups and there are membership groups. So there are already, groups out there that exist for that reason.
Okay, a question we've had live this evening. The report identifies the RCVS role, and this raises the question about the RCVS fitness to be a regulatory body. Are we now at that point where there needs to be a full RCVS reform and a call for independent regulation? Are we moving forward to a point where a vote of no confidence is required against them? What is BVNA's stance on RCVS and their current position and future? And what does the current BVNA elected council believe should happen here?
I think we need to gain more information from the CMA review. It's quite a big question that I think there's a lot of things that we need to take into consideration. There are already reviews being undertaken. So I think, we'll probably have to come back to that one at a later date.
Another question we've had from our emailed questions is, standardised pricing structures come into play? Maybe standardised wage banding could too, particularly for us vet nurses.
So we should put it out there quite quickly that standardised pricing is not going to happen. Competition is promoted and will continue to be promoted, and the government can't regulate private businesses on how they set their prices. Otherwise, they'd be able to do that for absolutely everything that charges for anything. With regards to wage banding, that is completely different per business, per company, per corporate. I know that some are looking at it now. It's not always sustainable and practical because of the huge variance in practice size, what they see, what they do, but it's definitely something that is being discussed and talked about. But unfortunately, it's not something that the government can push to happen because they are unable to control that part of our profession.
I think transparency of nurse wages within the company, I think that's something we should definitely move towards within individual businesses. But like Joe was saying, it's impossible, because if we were to set salaries at a certain point and the business isn't performing, how are people going to get paid? It's as simple as that, really. It has to be done on the profitability of the company individually.
I think it's really important to note there that your staff costs, particularly at the moment within the profession, they used to sit at 45% of your turnover of what you have in there. And actually they're now between 50-55% because of all of the different changes in wage, the cost of living, everything else that's gone up, and benefits. And that's a considerable amount of the income that you're getting into the practice. So we have to be really mindful of that, because your bottom line is actually very small.
And there's a whole other conversation off the back of that that we could have about nurses, charging for nurses' time, but that's for another day.
That's a whole different conversation.
Yeah. That's our other
soapbox. Another question we've had. That's another soapbox. Yeah. What can we do? What can we be doing as RVNs to support our practices in regards to this matter?
Oh, so much of it. I think we've probably already touched on quite a lot of it already, but it's having those financial conversations, it's sending out those estimates, it's being part, it's when you're given that information, financial information, trying to understand it or ask the right questions or absorb it. Don't just ignore that in your email or however it's come to you. And I think it's having taking that step back, like we talked about at the very beginning, recognizing that this is a client in front of you that's maybe potentially frustrated, and just clarifying, really. That's all they want. They don't really understand what's going on behind the scenes. And so I think it's just, yeah, supporting the clients and supporting your co-workers and doing what we can to be part of the resolution here.
So another question come live is, just pop it back up again. The review has also stated that around 25% of pet owners did not know that getting a prescription filled elsewhere was an option. I find this really surprising, as none of the clinics I have worked with have ever held this information back. What do you think about that? Is it something that it's the information, the way that it's been provided, or the way it's been given, and it's just not taken on board?
It's probably something.
Sorry,
Sorry.
People will choose ease as well, and
yeah,
I've definitely known a lot of situations where it's had to require a proactive client to ask, regardless of signs in the waiting room, which we may have up. And we all know, if we've sat in the waiting room somewhere, do you read all of the signs, or are you sat there, you know, worrying about what's going to happen and looking at your phone? So actually, I'm not overly surprised by that. I do still think that 25% is quite low, so we're doing all right within that people are aware of it. But I think that's something that we need to be more proactive with doing. The information is definitely not held back, but it's probably just because there've been no questions asked, and they're taking what's there on the day.
I think we overlook it. I think you're right. I think it's something, we're so methodical in what we do and how we do it, that that's something slightly out on the periphery that we should be able to reiterate to our clients, but we've ticked the box, we put it where it needs to go. It's on the website, it's on the wall. That's our job done. And you're right, it's clients not having that wet, but also as well, alongside that, it's the ease of just, not that I think this is necessarily what comes into someone's head, but I think if someone asks you for a prescription, you've then got to wait for the vet to write that prescription, put it up, give it to the client, whereas actually they've just printed that label out for the meds that you can just go and grab off the shelf. So it's convenience as well, and it is something we definitely need to be better at.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Another live question. Will this investigation also look into the locum industry, as that needs regulation, and I think is part of the current issue?
Are we ready for that wormhole going down there? I think that is something that actually, you know, regulation is going to be very difficult within that. We regulate individual professionals within the RCVS, and they have to follow that code of conduct with regards to charging, working principles. We all had the chaos of IR35, which was an attempt to regulate self-employed workers. Didn't go quite as expected. And it really actually put a lot more pressure on. So I can't disagree that it's not a perfect system. And I think it's also really not had a good impact on those really genuine good locums that are needed within our profession to support our teams and allow them to have a break and go on holiday. But that is probably not something that's going to come in with regards to the CMA review and investigation.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Excellent. Another live question. Will the CMA be liaising with the RCVS on this investigation, communicating with veterinary professionals in the industry as part of the process? I worry that if not, this could end up being a very biased investigation against what we stand for as professionals and ultimately our dedication to animal welfare.
Absolutely.
Really?
So there's a consultation period now of 4 weeks, of which we're going to pop the link in at some point. So it's 4 weeks. So absolutely, it's open to everyone. Go on there, read it, send your opinions in. Also bear in mind the 11,000 of the 56,000 people, so around about 20%, of people that replied to their original survey were veterinary professionals. So some people have already had their say. The option was there for us to all have our say. And so now we've got this consultation period. So absolutely do it. It's really important that you take the time to do that. And sorry, they are liaising with all stakeholders, RCVS, BVA, everyone. Yeah.
Absolutely. Fill it in and get your voice heard. This is our chance to We've got 83 attendees on this call here. If all of you fill in that and share your thoughts and ideas, that is going to have an impact. You need to get your voice heard. This is not something to sit back on, feel really angry about, and see everything going on social media. Get your voice heard.
But also remember, it's a positive, you know, I know it's hard because of the social media backlash, but this is a really positive thing for the veterinary nursing industry, for the veterinary industry, but specifically veterinary nurses. If this means that the Veterinary Surgeons Act is reviewed earlier, and it's recommended that it's reviewed, there are so many things that will benefit veterinary nurses. It will review what we do in practice, protecting the title. There's just so much opportunity here. When we look at the pharmaceutical costings, which is one of the things that they've raised, we know that's a problem for us as veterinary professionals. We know that we can't buy our meds from anywhere other than veterinary wholesalers. We know that we can buy it, it's more expensive for us to buy it through them than it is online. So if that fixes that problem, imagine the reduction in client conflict you're going to have from that side of things as well. So there's a lot of great things that are going to come from this. And if it means that for those, and you know, some of you on the call probably sat here thinking, we do this, we do that in my practice. Brilliant if you do that consistently, but there will be some practices out there that don't do it. And it isn't necessarily down to those people working on the ground floor level, like we talked about earlier. It might be that actually you're working in one of those practices and you want to do estimates, you want to be doing this, that, and the other, and you don't feel like you've got anywhere to go. So this will set those parameters and mean that we have to do it. So it can only be a good thing. I know at the moment it's hard to see that because of the backlash that we felt over the last few days. And particularly, I know, well, wherever you work, you're feeling this in some capacity, but it's definitely a positive thing. So having your viewpoints put through on that consultation is really important.
I agree. We're being kind of distracted, aren't we? And it's painful with all of that negative noise that's in the media at the moment. And then we're getting that from the clients that's not allowing us to look at the positives that will come of this investigation. And when you're thinking about sort of controlling your mindset and being really aware of what's going on, do take that time just to really consider the good that can come out of this, because it will force some change that we've been trying to get for a long time.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the link is in the chat box for what we've discussed. Please go and link onto it. And another question that we have, going back to when we're talking about estimates, regarding estimates for care, do you think RVNs currently get enough training on the cost of care and the cost of services in practice to allow us to understand and be with that more transparent?
I think we could do better. I think that it's the fee structure and the breaking down and the understanding of sort of what goes into that. And it's such a big thing because obviously when, you know, Joe does a lot of training in this, but when you look at actually the costs, so where that £1 goes and how that's split in your practice, it's understanding why you have those markups there. And I did see earlier somebody asked a question, you might have answered it, sorry Joe, about the 25% markup. Again, that's completely variant on individual practices because it depends on your outgoings and what costs you need to cover as to what percentage markup you put in certain areas. And there are loss leaders, I know we're not supposed to say that, but there are loss leaders in practice, such as your routine, your neuterings. We usually end up losing money on those. So which I think sometimes makes it difficult for obviously clients, but also for our staff to understand why that spay is that much, but that, I don't know, that lump removal is that much. So it's transparency of how we build those costs up. That's a big project. And I think, you know, like I said earlier, it's difficult, but when we get that financial information sent out to us, or we don't understand something, or we want to know why something is a certain way, always ask. I know that at the moment you might not get those answers, but this is hopefully something that will also be tackled as part of this CMA. I know I'm talking about it a lot, but it's transparency. It's that transparency of everything that we give to clients. We will have to train our staff to be able to understand before. And so it all comes together.
And it's also our responsibility to ask questions, to find out, to, you know, inquire as to why. We need to move away from this feeling of secrecy or you don't need to know that. Actually, we're all in this together as a team, and having that greater understanding will give you the confidence to have those conversations with clients as well. Because we all want to provide a service and we all want to uphold animal welfare. but we also want to be paid for what we're doing, and we want to be able to have the equipment, the medicines that we need to be able to provide that care and that treatment. And that does all cost, and everything's going up at the moment. There is a lot of pressure on the general public, on us as a profession and individuals, because costs are rising with everything. So we are under pressure, and we're really feeling it at the moment. But inevitably, we need to be able to charge. And I saw that there's a comment in there about the NHS. This comes up all the time. But I would like to just point out that we do have this in that country, and it is in our country, and it is an obvious issue. But I was on a meeting with European colleagues today who are also facing the same issues with the same conversations with their clients as well. So it isn't just localized with us. And also, I want to also stress, it's not just our profession. It's much wider. We often get blinkered into, you know, what's going on with us, but actually it's a wider consideration and a wider issue there is that everybody's going through. And somebody also pointed out to me today that this whole thing that we're going through now with this CMA investigation happened to opticians not that long ago, and they went through the same thing and having to be transparent in their prices. And it's a process that we're going to go through. We need to evolve, we need to develop, we need to change. And actually, this is where we're fearful of change, and unfortunately we're getting the backlash because of the negative media. But actually think about embracing that change and what can we do better to support our clients and ourselves and uphold animal welfare.
And I think you're quite right, Jo. I think there's been the funeral industry, funeral services, and also children's nurseries as well, not that long ago. And I think we don't hear about that so much because actually it doesn't impact so much of the general public. It's because it's animals and everyone loves animals, and that's why we are where we are at the moment. So it's, again, going back to the very beginning, it's setting those boundaries. It's hard, but it's not you, it's not personal, it's frustration, and it is poorly played out in the media, unfortunately. But yeah, it is, and it is to protect the consumer. That's what the CMA does, and it's the right thing to do. It is the right thing to do, and like we keep saying, it provides that support, that transparency, that clarity that we need in all of those areas. And there may be more that comes out of this. Some of this stuff may drop off. We don't know yet, unfortunately. We've only got this initial, and then obviously we'll have that consultation period, and I'm sure more will come from that. But it's hard to say, try not to get hung up on it. But we always do. We always see the negatives rather than the positives. But it will also die down. I appreciate, obviously, we've got this 4-week consultation, then there'll be something else, so it'll probably hype up again a little bit more. Hopefully the media will be a bit more informed then, and we can do our bits as veterinary professionals as well to help inform our clients carefully and be mindful of other professionals. But it's definitely, it will go. It will be something, and once they've got the answers to those questions, and once those things are put in place, it will be much better for everybody.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And we just need to remember, think about how many active clients you have on your books and how many of you actually heard from. And it will be a small percentage of your clients. And the rest are what we call just people who are happy, satisfied clients that are ticking along. And like Lindsay said, we're very quick to complain and ask questions. How many of you have left a positive review of something that you've experienced, or is it just a service or a standard you've expected and you've been happy and would go back again? And it's really important to remember that for our own well-being, that actually the majority of our clients are happy with the service that we're providing. And we know that we're building up really good relationships with them, and we're doing our job. So keep doing that, keep doing your job. And I also really want to stress and point out that VetLife are very aware that this is going on, and there is a professional at the end of the phone for you if you're really feeling overwhelmed and struggling with this, that you can have a conversation with, and they will support you through that. They will redirect you to where you need to go if that is the case. But please do utilize that service that is available to all RVNs and all vets, and actually our reception teams, VCAs, can call the helpline as well, and they will support them through that. And then there's the other access options available to you within what VetLife offers. So don't feel that you're alone in this. Our whole profession is going through this. Try and focus on the positive. Try and switch off at the end of the day, and do something that makes you feel good, whether that's going for a walk, whether that is having a glass of wine. We can't advocate that, can we? But it certainly cheese, have cheese. I mean, we have to think about the good that is in there as well, because we've had a lot to deal with recently, haven't we, as a profession? We really have been bombarded by the media, and I think that's why it feels even heavier at the moment. But you are doing a good job.
And that actually ties in really nicely to a couple of the questions that was asked about what can we be doing as RVNs to support our practices, and how does this review affect us, and what are the next steps?
I think the next steps are at some point in the next couple of days, everybody that's on this webinar going and have a looking at the consultation. It is quite long, but it is broken down. It's fairly easily digestible. I've had a look at it earlier, and then give your opinions on those. I think supporting each other. I think you know, if there's somebody in our practice that we see is struggling, that maybe hasn't been part of this evening, if you can just tell them to take 5. And, you know, sort of have a conversation with them and sort of reassure them that it's not them, you know, all the things that we've discussed this evening, and really getting on board and just interacting with this, because it's your opportunity to make a difference. And I know that's really cliche and corny, but it is. And great things will come from this. I know it doesn't necessarily feel like it for some people who may have been at the coalface on Monday morning or Tuesday morning when it all came about, but it gives us great opportunity, and that's one of the things I'd like to leave it, you know, for us to leave on as a really positive note, is all the great things. I feel really very passionate about that, which is why we wanted to have this conversation this evening, because on Tuesday, as it was unfolding, which was actually only yesterday, feels like it's much later in the week, our concerns as BVNA was actually the impact that this was going to be having on the professionals in practice. And actually it could be, I mean, I was watching it unfold in the media, listening to it on the radio, and it just was so unbalanced, and that's a big part of it. And I obviously am fortunate that I can step away and have that perspective and think, well, this will go, and look at the great things that will come from this. So it might not seem like it now, but this is going to be really positive for veterinary nurses.
Yeah, I agree.
Excellent. And if you haven't already noticed, the VetLife information has been popped into the chat, as well as the link for the consultation. So thank you to Lindsay and Joe for answering all those questions. Thank you to everyone for also joining us for this evening. Just a few points to wrap up with. Please consider going onto that link and responding to the CMA consultation regarding the full market investigation. It's open to the veterinary profession and businesses, and it closes on the 11th of April. Given the challenging circumstances happening in practices at this moment, please, if you need to speak to somebody, as I said, VetLife information is in the chat, available to veterinary professionals 24/7, and you'll find more information at vetlife.org.uk. And finally, BVNA do provide our members an advisory service, which can assist on a wide variety of employment, legal and HR issues. If you feel you do need support in this regard, please feel free to reach out to them. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Lindsay. And we hope to see you again at another BVNA event soon.
Thank you, Nikki.
Thank
I just
you.
want to say again in the chat quickly, Charlotte has put in there that Lindsay and the rest of council will be contributing to the consultation as well, and making sure that the veterinary nurses' voice is heard, so that you will be represented by the BVNA as well. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Nikki. Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you.